Okay guys, so today I'll be doing an introduction to Lunalight, one of the decks that is getting very good support in Duelist Advance, which is just around the corner, and these cards are quite strong, so they probably will have a decent impact on the metagame and also probably be somewhat of a budget option unless Konami decides to make some of these cards very expensive. So if you're new to my channel, I tend to stay away from combos and spreadsheets and talk more about deck theory and game plan. What is the goal of a deck? What are you trying to accomplish every single game? So in this video, I will do three different things. Firstly, I will talk about the primary gimmicks that this deck revolves around and essentially what the game plan is. Secondly, I will do a very brief overview of some of the most important cards so that you can follow along with the rest of the video if you're not already familiar. And thirdly, I will show you a few different lines that explain how to sequence your plays in order to achieve the game plan under a few different scenarios. So let's get started with Liger Dancer, which is basically the game plan. There are two gimmicks that this game plan revolves around. There are two goals you're trying to achieve every single game. The first is establishing Liger Dancer. So this is a level 12 fusion monster that requires Lunalight Leo Dancer, that specific name, and 3 Lunalight monsters. But even though this requires 4 materials, it's actually pretty easy to make this, as you'll see in a minute. So this has to be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials, and it is unaffected by card effects except Lunalight cards. Quick note here, this is any Lunalight card. So if your opponent is playing Lunalight, then they can affect this with their Lunalight cards. It's just anything else this is unaffected by, even your own cards. This can make a second attack during each battle phase, which is important because this has 3,800 attack, so that's pretty strong. And that also means that even though this isn't game by itself, basically any other monster in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh!, well, I mean, almost any other one is also game. So if you have anything else on board with this and you attack with that other thing, then you're basically going to do game. Once per turn, quick effect, you can send one Lunalight monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, destroy all your opponent's special summoned monsters. So if it wasn't enough that this is a Towers card, this also has a quick effect Raigeki. And by the way, these effects aren't once per name, these are just once per the card. These are just soft once per turns. So if you make 2 Liger Dancers, which is definitely possible, there are lines that do that, then you're going to have 2 Raigekis, and your opponent has to out 2 Towers, otherwise there will be 2 more Raigekis on the follow-up turn. So this card, being a Towers, is the primary goal of this deck. The second and most important thing about this deck in terms of the game plan is that you are trying to combine Liger Dancer with other cards that are very unfair that you couldn't normally play as part of your end board. So Baguska is probably the most typical one. This card obviously says, while this card is in face-up defense position, change all face-up monsters on the field to defense position and negate the activated effects of monsters that were in defense position when that effect was activated. By the way, if you're new to Yu-Gi-Oh! And you don't know how these mechanics work, even if they had a monster on field that is in defense position because Baguska put it to defense, and you tribute that monster to activate the effect, so it's in the graveyard, it's still activated on field, and this negates the activated effects of monsters that were in defense position when the effect was activated. So even if their position changed, if they activated the effect while in defense position, it's still going to be negated. So this is an extremely strong floodgate type card, and because your Liger Dancer is unaffected by your own cards, as long as they are not Lunalights, then this will still work, and so you can keep your Liger Dancer in attack position, your Baguska can be sitting in defense, and other typical end boards will usually have the Liger Dancer plus the Baguska, and then also a Little Knight. So imagine how hard it is for your opponent to out Little Knight and Baguska just to get to your Towers, which will still then have a Raigeki effect. So this is basically the game plan. There are other things you can do, like you can make a Gallant Granite with the bodies that would have made Baguska to search a Nib, because Nib is obviously a much stronger card when you're going first, and they have to play into a board with Nib. Whereas if you're just using Nib as a hand trap, then it's much easier to play through that. And your Nib, of course, will not affect your Liger Dancer because Nibiru is not a Lunalight card. So, okay, now let's do a brief card overview of some of the most important cards outside of Liger Dancer, and then I will show you some lines. So we also have the Lunalight Silverhound, which is one of the best cards in the deck. It's also one of the new ones. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon 1 Lunalight monster from your deck except itself, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck except Lunalight monsters while you control that face-up monster. This is actually a very important lock. And while it is pretty easy to play around, if you ever forget this, you may just completely end your own turn and have no comeback from the game. So you do have to keep this in mind. When a spell / trap card or effect is activated on the field, quick effect, you can banish this card and one Lunalight fusion monster from your graveyard, negate the activation. And these are once per turn effects. So the Liger Dancer dumping a Lunalight from your extra deck to the graveyard to do the Raigeki is actually pretty important, because sometimes you're going to use all of the fusions in your graveyard. You're going to banish all of them to make the Liger Dancer, and this won't have material to banish for the spell trap negate. So the Liger Dancer basically guarantees that your Silverhound is going to resolve, so you also have to keep that in mind. But this is very strong because it's an additional layer, because it's in your graveyard. It's not just like another guy on field that they might be able to wipe and then just deal with your Liger Dancer. So this is very, very strong. Then we have Lunalight Gold Leo. So if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Lunalight monster from your deck to your hand except itself and then discard one card. So obviously strong, it's like a Stratos. If a Lunalight monster is sent to the graveyard, while this card is in your monster zone, even during the damage step, you can target one of them and add it to your hand. This is one of the basic parts of every combo that you'll see in a moment. The last thing that I will tell you before going and showing you the lines is that a lot of these cards are not once per turn. And so your ability to play the deck will revolve around being able to loop these effects. For example, this pendulum effect says once per turn, you can target one Lunalight monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but it cannot attack, its effects are negated, and also it is destroyed during the end phase. So this is a soft once per turn. This is not once per name, it's just once per this being face up on the field. So if you can bounce this card, for example, and then you replace it in the scale, you can infinite number of times a turn continue special summoning from your graveyard. There are lots of cards like this, like the Kaleido Chick says, you can send a Lunalight monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard as cost, so this will still dump even if the effects are negated. Then the name of this face-up card on the field can be treated as the sent monsters, if used as fusion material this turn. Now that actually can come up. It is like useful in the sense that the Liger Dancer requires Lunalight Leo Dancer, which is a fusion monster, and you could dump a Leo Dancer to make this Leo Dancer, but usually you don't actually need to do that, and you just want to be able to dump more materials into the graveyard. So yeah, there are lots of other cards that aren't once per turn, or rather they're just like soft once per turns, and so you're just going to continue trying to loop those as often as possible. Okay, so let's get into some of the basic replays, and then I will give you my thoughts on where the deck is positioned right now. So let me filter this. Okay, so the first one is a Gold Leo combo, and I'm doing this with only one card in hand to show you that even though you have to discard when you add, this is actually like usually desirable, and obviously it depends on what's in the rest of your hand, but it's not really like a downside. So here I'm gonna summon Gold Leo and then add a Yellow Marten, and then I'm gonna have to discard a card. But Yellow Marten has an effect where if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add a Lunalight spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So we're going to add the Lunalight Masquerade, and this one says if it was activated this turn, you can dump a Lunalight monster from your deck to the graveyard. And as I just went over with the Silverhound, if that is dumped by a card effect, then she can special summon one from deck. So yeah, so now we're going to activate the Masquerade and dump the Silverhound. And because this was dumped by a card effect, so this can't be dumped by cost. This has to be dumped by card effect specifically. So like, you know, Foolish Burial will also work, but the Kaleido Chick, which dumps as cost, will not trigger this. So anyhow, now we can summon a Lunalight monster from our deck besides itself. And here we're going to summon the Kaleido Chick. And so the Kaleido Chick can dump a Black Sheep. And the reason we're dumping another body in the grave isn't just to have a random body. It's because we want to have a way to fuse into our first fusion monster. And Black Sheep has an effect where you can discard it to either add a Lunalight monster from grave to hand besides itself, or to add a polymerization from deck to hand. And then it has another effect where if it's sent to the grave as fusion material, you can add to your hand a Lunalight Pendulum monster from your extra deck, or a Lunalight monster from your graveyard to the hand. This is not like as important for the combo, but Gold Leo's other effect, where if a Lunalight monster is sent to the graveyard while this is in the monster zone, then we can add it to our hand. So we're going to add the Black Sheep to our hand because we just pitched it here. And now the Black Sheep can be discarded to search for a polymerization. So remember that the Kaleido Chick, and I'm not going to spend as much time going over every single individual piece in the rest of the combos. I just want you to understand what's happening in the first combo, and then I can go more quickly over the next ones. But anyhow, remember the Kaleido Chick was brought off of the Silverhound, so we're currently locked into Lunalight monsters. So we couldn't, for example, just make a Baguska and pass here. But that's okay because we've searched for a polymerization. So now we can go into the Perfume Dancer, and here we can activate a few different triggers. So the Perfume Dancer, if it is fusion summoned, can add a Lunalight perfume from your deck to your hand. And then the Kaleido Chick has an effect where where is it? If uses fusion material this turn, sorry, if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target one polymerization in your graveyard, add it to your hand. And that effect is once per turn, but the dumping isn't. So we're going to add back the polymerization, and now we're going to get a perfume to our hand. So the perfume, remember, is basically the monster reborn. So we can bring back a card, and remember that the Kaleido Chick's dumping is not once per turn. And also remember, if we go back to the game plan for a second, the whole point is to make Liger Dancer and then some other unfair cards like Baguska that'll make it almost impossible for them to out our Liger Dancer. So if we're going to summon a Liger Dancer, we need to have access to a Leo Dancer because this is one of the mandatory materials for summoning the Liger Dancer. So anyhow, we've sent the Leo Dancer. This is now treated as Leo Dancer. And now we can use Yellow Martin's other effect, where if she's in the hand or graveyard, you can target a Lunalight card you control, except itself, return it to the hand, and if you do, special summon this card in defense position, but banish this card when it leaves the field. So because we have a continuous spell on field, this is basically a free bounce because we're not losing the card, and now we can put this out onto the field. One other very important thing to note about this card, even though this is typically a one-of, is this is a very important card because this allows you to recycle lots of your soft once per turn effects, like the pendulum guy that summons from the graveyard. Because you can just bounce the pendulum, summon this out, and then replace the pendulum, and then summon again. So yeah, this is a very, very important part of all the sequences, or most of the sequences. So yeah, now you can go into Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Tiger King, because this one will set a Tenki from your deck. And then when you activate the Tenki, there are lots of, well, you can get whatever you want, because this adds a level 4 or lower Beast Warrior monster from your deck to your hand, and all of your level 4 or lowers are Beast Warriors. You also can search for the Tri-Brigade card instead off of this, and I'll show you that in a different line. But anyhow, now we are getting Lunalight Tiger, which is the one whose pendulum effect can target a Lunalight monster in your grave and special summon it, but then it can't attack and its effects are negated. But, you know, you just need the material. So now we can place the Lunalight Tiger and use the effect to bring back out the Gold Leo. Now, if we wanted, if we had a Kaleido Chick in graveyard, which is currently a material here, and we bring it out off the Lunalight Tiger and its effects are negated, remember that the Kaleido Chick dumps as cost, so it doesn't matter if the effects are negated. So just keep that in mind, because depending on the hands that you draw, you'll have to like think about which cards you're gonna bring back and loop. So now the Perfume Dancer has another effect, so it doesn't just add the Lunalight Perfume when it's fusion summoned, but also you can target one other Lunalight card you control, return it to the hand or extra deck, then you can special summon one Lunalight monster from your hand. Now, usually you're not going to special summon another one from hand unless you've drawn something else that's useful, but you do want to be able to bounce the Lunalight Tiger in the same way that the Yellow Martin can bounce stuff, so that you can just use their effects over and over again. So now we can turn two bodies into a cross sheep that is pointing to a fusion monster, and because we can use the Lunalight Tiger again because it's not once per turn, we can bring something back to a zone that cross sheep points to, and then that will float another body like the Kaleido Chick. Now the Kaleido Chick, again, because it is not once per turn, we can just continue dumping monsters to the graveyard. So in this case, if we've already gone through the important things, like we have our Yellow Martin in rotation, we've already used the Silverhound effect to summon from deck, and we've used the Black Sheep to get our polymerization, there usually aren't many cards that you want to put in the graveyard. And so sometimes you'll just put additional fusion monsters in the graveyard to have more fodder for making your Liger Dancers later. And Leo Dancer is one of the important ones because obviously you have to use a Leo Dancer. So now you can do something like use the Lunalight Perfume's other effect where you banish it from the graveyard, then discard a card, and you can add a Lunalight monster from your deck to your hand. And now we're getting to the final important piece of the engine requirements. This is Lunalight Wolf. So this one's pendulum effect says you cannot pendulum summon monsters except Lunalight monsters, which doesn't matter. This effect cannot be negated. That also doesn't matter. Once per turn, you can fusion summon one Lunalight fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your field or graveyard. Now, obviously, you don't want to just banish materials from your field for no reason because you want to use those for bodies. So you want to get all of those bodies into the graveyard so that summoning the Liger Dancer is basically free. So now we can go into a Little Knight, for example. So our Perfume Dancer and our Cross Sheep can go into a Little Knight. And then we can use the 2/4s to go into a Baguska because the Little Knight is a link monster, so obviously it can't turn to defense, so this won't be negated. And then we're not using the poly. This is just a card in hand that could have been a discard. The Lunalight Wolf can now banish materials from our graveyard to summon the Liger Dancer. So if you look at our basic field, this is off of one gold Leo, but obviously in a normal game, you'll be using a bunch of different cards. you have the basic game plan, which is you've summoned your tower's monster, but you also have an unfair floodgate card that does not affect your tower's monster, and then you have an additional line of protection in the Little Knight that will help you clear your opponent if they have like a ton of push into your towers. So this is the basic idea of what the deck is trying to do. Okay, now let me show you a couple more. So there's a different line that you can do with the Gold Leo. So we're going to Gold Leo. Remember, this one adds and then discards. So we're going to add and discard the Silver Hound. That's the one that brings out from deck. So we're going to bring out the Kaleido Chick, and then the Kaleido Chick can dump the Black Sheep. This is going to be like a pretty standard thing to get used to, where you're trying to get the Silver Hound engraved to bring something else out, and then you want to loop the Kaleido Chick's dump as many times as possible to fuel your graveyard, either because you need like a Black Sheep, which you're going to add back off of Gold Leo to search for your poly, but also because you want to be able to dump your Leo Dancers to go into the Liger Dancers later. So anyhow, the Gold Leo will add back the Black Sheep. The Black Sheep will now search for the poly, and you'll activate poly, go for the Perfume Dancer. Remember that we're under the lock of Silver Hound whenever the monster that it has brought out is still on field. So now the Perfume Dancer can search for the Lunalight Perfume, and the Kaleido Chick can add back the Polymerization once per turn. So if you activate the Perfume here and bring out the Kaleido Chick, again, it's not once per turn, so if you want, you can continue dumping, but the Lunalight Perfume's Grave effect will allow us to banish it, discard a card, which in a lot of cases is going to be the poly that we add back, because usually you only actually activate this card once, and then we're going to search for the Lunalight Tiger. So here we're going to dump a Yellow Marten. This is another good rule of thumb to think of with this deck is these are like the basic cards you're trying to go through is the Silver Hound to special something for free, the Black Sheep to search your poly, the Yellow Marten to give yourself a free body and cycle your soft once per turns, and then looping the Kaleido Chick. So once you have these cards in rotation, you have all of the engine requirements that are required for establishing your end board. So anyhow, the Kaleido Chick has dumped the Yellow Marten. Now we're going to place the Lunalight Tiger and use the effect to bring something out. We can now use the Perfume Dancer to bounce because Yellow Marten isn't the only one that can bounce, so we place the Lunalight Tiger back into our hand. Go into the Fire Fist Tiger King, place the Tenki. Now we're going to go into a Cross Sheep. So just remember that you don't actually have to have the fusion monster still here for the Cross Sheep play to work, as long as you have a way to bring out a fusion monster. So in this case, the Lunalight Tiger can bring back out the same Perfume Dancer, and then the Cross Sheep can bring something else out, and obviously you can just continue dumping off the Kaleido Chick. But you also can make a Cross Sheep if you already have access to the Lunalight Wolf, and then hard make the Liger Dancer under the Cross Sheep, and then it'll still bring something else out or whatever. So anyhow, now we're going to Tenki and search for a Black Sheep. So this is one of the main differences with the previous combo, because remember, this card, not only is it not once per turn, but you don't have to add a poly from your deck to your hand. You can also add a Lunalight monster from your graveyard to your hand. So if you had a way to dump the Lunalight Wolf, then you can, if you search Black Sheep later or you draw it later, you can pitch the Black Sheep to add back the Lunalight Wolf. So now we can Yellow Marten, because remember, we didn't use this bounce. We used the Perfume Dancer's bounce to bounce back the Lunalight Tiger. So we bounce back our Lunalight Tiger with a Yellow Marten, and now we have 2 4s on board. So those can go into, for example, a Baguska if we wanted, or a Gallant Granite to search for a nib. In this case, I'm going to make a Little Light and play slightly more griddly here because we can use Lunalight Tiger again, and we can bring out something else like a Kaleido Chick. And remember, again, we can dump if we want, so we can dump a Leo Dancer, because if you have never dumped a Leo Dancer, you probably won't be able to summon the Liger Dancer. So never forget that this has to be in your rotation before you lose access to Kaleido Chick. Always have that in graveyard before you lose access to Kaleido Chick. So now, again, we have 2 4s on board, and again, we can choose between Baguska or Gallant Granite into a Nibiru. But normally, if you're making the Gallant Granite, then you want to link it off into a Little Knight or a Cross Sheep or something so that you have access to the materials engraved. If you're making a Baguska, whatever you make as materials under the Baguska are going to stay there on field, and you're going to be locked out of those. So when it's time for you to go for the Lunalight Wolf to make your Liger Dancer, you have to make sure that all of the materials are already accessible to you. So you already have the Leo Dancer and then 3 other Lunalight names in graveyard. So if we just take quick stock of this again, here you're keeping the Cross Sheep, and you potentially can use the Cross Sheep later on, or it can be link material for something else on the crackback if it survives. But really you just want the Little Knight, the Baguska, and the Liger Dancer. And then also remember that when you banish your 4 from grave, you never want to banish the Silver Hound. You always want this to be a spell and trap negate, but because you don't have any other fusions in grave to banish for this effect, you're going to have to use the board wipe effect of Liger Dancer because that will dump a fusion that the Silver Hound will be able to banish for the spell trap negate. So just always keep that in mind when you're thinking about your end boards. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you two more. One of them is with Tenki, and this requires a discard. So you're going to activate Tenki and search for Fractal, because this is just a Beast Warrior. Like, you can search any level 4 or lower Beast Warrior, but in this case, we're going to search for Fractal. And then the Fractal can dump itself, because the Fractal can dump anything. So you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard as cost. Send one level 3 or lower Beast Warrior, or Wing Beast monster from your deck to the graveyard. So the Silver Hound, luckily, is a level 3 or lower, so we can dump the Silver Hound. And because the Silver Hound is sent by card effect, it doesn't have to be a Lunalight one. We can now bring out a Lunalight from our deck, but we are locked into Lunalights from the extra deck while this remains face up on field. So now the Gold Leo is going to search and discard one, but in this case, unlike before, we want to keep the thing that we search, so we have to have a blank discard. So now we are going to summon the Kaleido Chick, and we can use Kaleido Chick and dump the Black Sheep. So remember that when you're starting your plays, you always want access to Silver Hound to special something else out. You usually want Gold Leo to search for something, and you want Kaleido Chick because this dumps as cost, and so this cannot dump the Silver Hound and trigger it because it has to be sent by card effect, and this sends as cost. This is why this works when it's negated. But if you dump the Black Sheep and you have the Gold Leo on field, you can add back the Black Sheep, and now you can search for the Poly. So even though we're currently under the Lunalight lock from the extra deck, we can just Poly into the Perfume Dancer, and then that can search the Lunalight Perfume, and our Kaleido Chick adds back our Poly. So now we can still continue playing. So we Lunalight Perfume to Monster Reborn the Kaleido Chick. We will dump the Leo Dancer, because remember, we need the Leo Dancer, otherwise we can't make Liger Dancer. So then the Perfume Dancer, this didn't come up before, but the effect where you can target one other Lunalight card you control, return it to the hand/extra deck, then you can special summon one Lunalight monster from your hand. So before, when I showed you were bouncing the Pendulum card, you obviously don't want to special summon it because you want to keep using it as a Pendulum card. But if we have already used the Kaleido Chick's dump effect while on field, because it's not once per turn, we can bounce it and then special summon the same card off the Perfume Dancer so that we can just dump again. And so here we can dump the Yellow Marten because we didn't get this into rotation yet. So yeah, now we make the Cross Sheep here, and we're going to activate Perfume Dancer to search for the Lunalight Wolf. So this is the case where you don't actually have a fusion monster yet, but you're going to gain access to a fusion with the Lunalight Wolf. So now the Lunalight Wolf can banish your 4 materials, including the Leo Dancer, to summon the Liger Dancer, and then your Cross Sheep can summon whatever, like a Kaleido Chick, which can now dump something else, for example, another Leo Dancer. Now you can use Yellow Marten's effect and bounce Lunalight Wolf, because much like the other Pendulum guy, this is also not once per turn. It's just once while it's face up on field. So now we have 2 level 4s on field, and we can do whatever we want with them. So in this case, another useful rule of thumb to think of is if you want to make a second Liger Dancer and you look in your graveyard and you don't have enough materials, then you can't make Baguska if you want to make a second Liger Dancer, because those materials will be stuck under the Baguska. So if you make a Gallant Granite, because let's say we only have a Silver Hound and a Leo Dancer, and we don't even want to banish the Silver Hound, it means that we're going to need to get these bodies back into the graveyard. So that's just something else to think about. Anyhow, so the Granite will now search for a Nib, and then one option is we can make a Little Light to get all of these bodies in the graveyard. Now we can replace the Lunalight Wolf, and now we can banish those cards to bring out another Liger Dancer. So if you do it this way and you lose the Silver Hound, it means that even after you dump a fusion with your Liger Dancer, you will not have a spell or trap negate. So you do have to think about your resource economy in this case, and obviously depends on the rest of your hand, whatever. But the point is just to show you that you can actually make 2 Liger Dancers if you want. So now the last thing that I'll show you is something for under Droll. So this combo, you activate Tenki and you search for the Fractal. So let's say on res you now get Drolled, and so you can no longer search for the rest of the turn. So that doesn't turn Fractal off because the Fractal can still dump the Silver Hound, and Silver Hound doesn't search its specials from deck. So now you can special summon a Kaleido Chick. Usually you would be summoning the Gold Leo, and then the Gold Leo would search something and you discard something, but obviously you can't do that under Droll. So Here we can make the Kaleido Chick, and here we can dump the Yellow Martin. The Yellow Martin can bounce the Kaleido Chick because we haven't used our normal summon yet to put a body on field, and now we have the Kaleido Chick in hand, which we can normal summon, and of course we can just dump another. So here we can dump a Leo Dancer, for example, and then pass on a Bagooska. So in this case, you're just dumping the Leo Dancer to have the Speller Trap negate for the Silverhound. Or if you don't use that, then it's just going to be in the graveyard for a follow-up. So I guess you don't technically have to dump the Leo Dancer. And you're just hoping to live on a Bagooska. So being able to make a Bagooska under Droll is not like an amazing board, but this paired with a Speller Trap negate may allow you to survive the turn. So yes, my final thoughts on this, my current thoughts on this are, I think this deck looks pretty interesting, and I think the thing that will give this deck depth and skill ceiling is that you want to draw a combination of engine cards all together. It's not really like you feel super safe just because you've drawn an X, you know, and it's like a super broken card that is a starter, extender, and a breaker. You want to draw a combination of cards so that, you know, maybe they negate one thing like your Gold Leo, but then you've already drawn access to the Black Sheep, and so you can still search for your Poly and continue playing. So this isn't technically like a multi-card combo deck. Like, you can't actually do combos off of one card like the Gold Leo, but you do want to have more options in hand. And so I think this deck will not be super straightforward to play, or at least like not at a very high level. And there probably is some other stuff to be explored in the deck. One thing that would be very cool is if people were to play Tri-Brigade again, I think it would probably just be a downgrade, because you want to have a good amount of non-engine in your deck, and then you also want to have a good amount of engine to draw multiples of your engine. But it would be cool, you know, the fact that you're using cards like Lunalight Wolf to banish your materials to go into your Liger Dancer, to then use something like Tri-Brigade Revolt to bring back all the banished monsters and then do your Link Summon or whatever. And then there are also cards like Karis, where you can discard something else to special summon it, and the discard could be useful because you might actually want to put something else engraved, like a Lunalight card, which would all be Beast Warrior, so it still works. And then this would still be able to banish those guys to Link Summon. It's just that the anti-synergy here would be, if you banish Lunalight monsters for your Tri-Brigade effects, then you won't be able to banish them off of the Lunalight Wolf to go into your Liger Dancer. So, but I think you could work around that, because you could dump your Tri-Brigade cards. Like, you could have a Nerval into whatever line and still be able to play it. But it probably wouldn't be as competitive, but I'm just mentioning it to say that, you know, if some people are interested in playing a more like rogue version of the deck, you probably could. And then the last thing is that Dominus Impulse does not actually conflict with the deck. So it's Light, Earth, and Wind lock. And even though the Lunalight Wolf is a light, and the one whose name that I keep forgetting, the Lunalight Tiger, is also still a light, this doesn't matter because you're only using these as pendulums. So you're only using them as spell cards, not as monsters. So the Impulse will not actually stop you from using these cards in the way that they're supposed to be used. So that's basically the video for now. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. If you have any other ideas for ways you could play this, either changes to the main or extra, then let me know in the comments. If you want to join the Discord, feel free to do so. And if you have not subscribed and you've made it to the end of the video, then maybe you should. So thanks for watching.